next session, Rethinking Multilateralism towards Reform, Reorientation and Rejuvenation. And for this session, I would like to invite Session Chair, Ambassador Mohan Kumar. Ambassador Professor Dr. Mohan Kumar is a professor of diplomatic practice at the Jindal School of International Affairs, OP Jindal Global University, Sonipat, India. In addition, he is the Dean of Strategic and International Initiatives in the Office of the Vice Chancellor and the inaugural Director of the Jindal Global Center for G20 Studies at the university. He served as India's Ambassador to France, that's where I met him, and Kingdom of Bahrain. Thank you so much, Dr. Mohan Kumar. It's all over to you, and just a small request. It would be great if we stick to the timelines, and it would be kind if the panelists could start with 3 to 4 minutes introduction so that we can accommodate questions from the audience as well without, without the session getting drawn for longer.
I'll do my best. Thank you. Can you hear me? Ambassador Hoque and Mr. Atul Aneja, please. So I think I just want to thank the foundation for getting us here, and extremely grateful for this opportunity. I'm going to be extremely brief because I think we're running against time. Mr. Tejinder Khanna, whom we knew as Commerce Secretary and then Lieutenant Governor, is really a boss for many of us. I would hate to keep him waiting. So if I can just maybe try and wrap it up by 7:05, 7:10. I don't know where Aditi is, but I think 7:05, 7:10. Yeah, 7:05, 7:10, we will wrap it up so that you can move on to the next. So look, rethinking multilateralism, I'm going to make some provocative remarks and then request my colleagues to take over because they are the ones who've come with prepared speeches. I'm going to cover the following specific institutions because talking in generalities about reforming multilateralism is neither here nor there. So let's begin with the Mecca of all multilateral institutions, which is the UN system. And I think it's fair to say the UN system is miserably failing all of us. You shouldn't have had Ukraine, you shouldn't have had Gaza, you shouldn't have had so many things. What is the use of a UN Security Council if you cannot maintain peace and security in the world? I request all of you to take a look at the Stockholm Peace Research Institute and the Norway Institute of Peace. They are talking in terms of 42 active conflicts in the world. The world has never seen more conflicts than in 2024. And that's quite remarkable. So what does India do? I basically think India and whoever else wants to join India, and I have in mind the G4, which is India, Brazil, Japan, and I'm missing the fourth one. Thank you, Germany. So either collectively or individually, there are only two options in the UN Charter. There is Article 109, which talks about a simple majority to convene a general conference of the UN General Assembly to discuss amendment of the Charter. And this is something you should do without any fear of failure. And then, of course, you've got Article 108, which calls for a 2/3 majority of all General Assembly members, plus the P5, the permanent members of the Security Council, not exercising the veto. I suspect we will get stuck in the second stage. But at least the first stage, we should go through to see what is the mood of the UN membership. Is it in favor of reform or not? Or is everyone playing us for suckers? Keep telling us, yes, we are in favor of India getting into the Security Council, but nobody really gives a damn in actual practice because they all cancel each other out as the permanent members of the Security Council. Some may mean it, others don't. So what's the point? So if this doesn't work, I have a slightly more radical proposal, and I'm only reluctantly putting forward this proposal. It's outlandish. I think India, along with a group of like-minded countries, should start an international peace and security forum. Make sure you start a UN Security Council. If countries are not willing to accept India, why the hell are we waiting till the cows come home? What for? So you might as well start something. Yes, I realize it's not easy. Why should other countries which already sit happily in the Security Council support us? But let's call their bluff. After all, some of them do keep saying in joint statements that we are not against India participating in the Security Council. So I would suggest we should give serious thought to it, because waiting for the Security Council reform has become like waiting for Godot, if you know Shakespeare. You're just waiting and waiting, nothing is happening, frankly. And it's a complete sheer hypocrisy and double standards of people sitting in the council with veto powers. There's no other way I can put it. So that's one. As far as multilateral development banks are concerned, I believe India's G20 chairmanship has done a fantastic job, and I would invite all of you to take a look at the Encasing Lawrence Summers report, which talks of the triple agenda for energizing the multilateral development banks. By multilateral development banks, I mean the World Bank, we mean the Asian Development Bank, and the Asian Infrastructure Bank. So it talks of tripling funding, it talks of more funding for climate action, more funding for SDGs and so on. Take a look at it. If we can implement it, I think that's fantastic. If you can't implement it, admit it's a failure and move on. People will find other sources of funding. Let me also point out that India has taken a very, very important step. We have not submitted our nationally determined contributions on climate change, mainly because we are not getting any funding from the international community. So the deadline passed, and I'm really happy that India has not done it. I mean, with due respect, we have some respectable people from China. China has built more coal-fired plants last year than ever before. China now burns more coal than the rest of the world put together. So at a time like this, for India to be told, you are to follow a low-carbon pathway to development, how the hell do you do that? Because energy poverty and economic poverty is related in India. So I would leave you with that thought. As far as IMF is concerned, again, take a look at the Indian G20 presidency the think tank T20 India report. It talks again of rebalancing quotas, of increasing the funding of IMF, and making sure that IMF acts as the lender of the last resort. So if you want to really reform all these three, that is UN, multilateral development banks, and IMF, the agenda is there. There is no dearth of ideas. What is lacking is political will. I put it to you that India should not wait. We keep our claims open in the UN. It doesn't mean I'm asking India to withdraw from the UN. I'm merely saying is a loss of credibility for India if we started in 2005 and we are still waiting in 2025 for countries to allow us to come into the Security Council. It makes no sense, frankly. So we have to think of alternative ways of achieving our objectives. Last point, before I hand it over to two of my colleagues, you will have 10 minutes each, gentlemen. The last point I want to make is what happens to G20 is going to be extremely serious. South Africa has a problem with the United States of America. It's a bilateral problem. It's a very serious problem. Now that problem threatens now to really, shall I say, undermine the success of the G20 summit in South Africa. Because the Secretary of State of the United States has decided he's not going next week to the foreign ministers' meeting in Pretoria. So South Africans don't know how to do this. South Africa has their own personal bilateral issues with the United States, but we may be looking at a scenario where the entire run-up of the G20 meetings will be not a consensus document. I don't see the US participating, or if the US participates, US may not be willing to subscribe to the declaration. After all, as the previous speaker said, US and UK have not joined the declaration on artificial intelligence, which is actually motherhood and apple pie, by the way. I mean, after all, there is human rights and human values and the rest of it. China has had no problem joining it. I don't see what the objections can be from US and UK. I fail to understand why they didn't join unless they're extremely opposed to open source AI and sustainable AI. That can be the only reason. So I think G20 also will come under a shadow this year. That leaves me to look at other fora. I think after the visit of Prime Minister Modi to US, it appears to me that plurilateral mechanisms will become stronger and stronger. Quadrilateral will certainly become very strong, it's obvious. There will be trilateral or triangular development corporations, cooperation, which has been referred to in the Franco-Indian joint statement. Reference for the first time in a bilateral document has been made to trilateral cooperation between India, UAE, France, and India, Australia, France. So it's very clear that India is not able to achieve its objectives in the UN. If we can't achieve our objectives in G20, and if other countries are going to block us, then we will just have to go ahead and form what is known as a spaghetti bowl of trilaterals. You will lose count of how many trilaterals India is part of. But we will have to do that. There is no other way, because we are being blocked in every multilateral forum. So let me leave it at that and ask my illustrious colleagues to spend 10 minutes trying mainly not to address the problems of multilateralism, because that I think the audience knows, I know, everybody knows. But what do you suggest countries like India should do to tackle the problem? Over to you, Professor Gulshan, Sachdeva.
Kumar, and thank you, for the invitation to participate here in this very, very useful forum. And I'm really impressed by the quality of speakers. In the last, 2-3 hours, we had a fantastic discussion, and this forum, or this particular session is a kind of a continuation of what we have been discussing for the last 2 hours. Now, you're absolutely right, and all the speakers have said that why we are rethinking multilateralism, because institutions which were supposed to function, they are not functioning. They are not effective. Whether you look at UNSC, look at WTO or WHO or many others. So as our Russian friend mentioned, so these all the old paradigms are not working. So what you're suggesting, and he also suggested the same thing, to some extent they are not working, but when it comes to crunch, sometimes they do work in one form or the another. But in the process, many other things are also happening. And this is what I think you are alluding to, because what country like India or many other countries are doing, because when you feel that the way you would like many of those institutions to function, they don't do that. The way you would like to be there, like our claim to the United Nations Security Council, we still don't get it. Then what do you do? And many things that actually I would say are happening in one way or the another. Why this is happening? And in fact, you mentioned about G20, you mentioned about a couple of other, those kind of institutions and the minilaterals and other. In a sense, I, apart from being a professor at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, now I'm also the chief coordinator of Dakshin, the Global South Center of Excellence, which was set up in 23 by India. When during our G20 presidency, Prime Minister had these meetings with all the countries from the Global South, Voice of the Global South Summit 1, 2, 3. In the first summit itself, he promised that India is going to set up this center. By the second summit, he inaugurated this summit, this center. Now, today, in one way or the another, I would say, since the time is very limited, just 2 or 3 points about what is happening in the broader global south and how this is really affecting all these multilaterals, minilaterals, or whatever laterals you can mention them. I mean, when United Nations was set up, you had about 53 countries. Now today, you have 193. Now, out of 193, if you look at G77, the numbers of countries which are part of G77 are 134 or something. Now all those 134 countries are roughly what we call Global South. I mean, you can have certain definitional problems here or there, but these are broadly the Global South countries. And one can argue, many people do argue, then what is the difference between today when we talk about Global South and during what we were doing during the non-alignment movement, during the new economic international order in the 70s, or the establishment of UNCTAD, etc. And many things are already happening, earlier also. So what is so unique about Global South when we in the last few years have started talking about Global South? Today, Global South is not what it used to be. These are not bunch of few developing countries. Here we are talking about heavyweights. Heavyweights politically, economically, strategically. And even if you look at within the United Nations or many of these multilateral institutions, what has really happened? Before 2015, we have the Millennium Development Goals, which was basically for the developing countries only. All these 8 Millennium Development Goals, hunger, poverty, etc., which are basically problems of the developing countries which need to be looked into. Suddenly, now after sustainable development goals came in, I mean, one can have problems of why all these numbers of 17, 18, 17 SDGs and 169 targets, etc. But the problem is we are not talking about the problems of only developing countries. Here we are talking about sustainable development goals for everyone. So it means everyone in the world talking about those issues which are actually confronting the Global South. So in one way you are saying that you are also not better in many of those. It's not question about women empowerment in the developing world, you also have the similar kind of problem. So it means things are being shaped in a very, very different manner. And if you look at today, the future technologies, I mean, in the last session we talked about quite a lot about technologies. If you look at the whole green transition which is happening, who are going to be the leaders of these green transitions? Because what we used to think, automobiles were coming basically from Europe and the United States and Japan earlier. But after 10 or 15 years, when all the cars are going to be of a different kind, who is going to produce those cars? And there's a lot of talk about artificial intelligence. Who are the leaders of these artificial intelligence? Not just only the West. China is also a very important member. You talk about all the connectivity things. So yes, every country, Europe and many others, and Americans, and of course, China's BRI and many others. So all those kind of things which are going to come now, they are not just going to come only from the West. Now, the question is, there is asymmetry within Global South. Now, how do you really deal with those issues? In fact, to me, in the long run, if I'm looking, I'm saying slowly and slowly, the dominance of the West is declining, both Europe and the US together. All other kind of countries are coming in which are going to take place. But there is a huge asymmetry. Now, how do you deal with the asymmetry of very big Chinese economy, technological power? Similarly, countries like India or Brazil or South Africa and many others, because they are also competing for the markets, they are also competing for influence. You look at all the development architecture of the world. So to me, in fact, in the years to come, these are the kind of issues for which India actually has to be more concerned than getting a seat at the UNSC, etc. Because those things will keep debating about it, whether we'll get it or will not get it. How do we really deal with all these kind of asymmetries? How do we deal with the development things which are happening with the infrastructure, projects, working with China or not working with China? How do we work with other developing countries? I think that, and for that, what kind of institutions are required? Whether you can do certain things during BRICS, or within BRICS, or many others, yes, it may not. I mean, as the Russian friend said, that still the dominance of the dollar is there. But still, certain things are being talked within BRICS. And many other countries are going to join. So many bilateral, I would say, transactions are taking place for certain commodities within BRICS members. So how do we really institutionalize slowly and slowly? That will perhaps will help us much better than actually talking about some of the reforms in those institutions which perhaps are never going to come. So, so at the end, in fact, since there's only 1 minute now, in the last 2-3 years, what we are seeing, even from our external affairs ministers and others, when they say that we are not anti-West, we are non-West. Yes. Now, that's one kind of narrative, but one could also, in fact, when I was discussing with Ambassador Verma a couple of weeks back, or maybe 2-3 months back, he said if there is certain thing need to be said against West, why don't we actually raise those issues as well? So there is not, why do we actually position ourselves in a manner that we are not anti-West? Because we are basically non-West, but if there is something which need to be criticized for the West, we need to be open to do that. So that kind of openness, that kind of thing. So ultimately, in fact, as in the beginning it was mentioned that, what the government of India or the Indian policy makers have been trying to say, going with certain kind of positive agendas. So all these kind of things from Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam or many others, these are the good, noble thoughts. But how do we really, in practical terms, how do we really concretize in the institutional manner? This is what actually the challenge is. Thank you.
So thank you. If I am to understand correctly what you're saying, therefore, is the issue-based coalitions. If the multilateral institutions are not working, and I think there has been reference even in the joint statement of the United States to the IMEC, the India, Middle East, Europe corridor, the I2U2. So we already have those kind of forums, and I think we should exploit those. By the way, for those who are fond of reading joint statements, and anybody who is interested in international relations should read the joint statement carefully. In my view, and I could be wrong, this is the first time there is an Indo-American joint statement where there is no reference to US supporting India as a P5 member. The aspiration of India to join the Security Council. I've checked 2024 Biden statement, it was there. But this has maybe less to do with US lack of support than to Mr. Trump's disdain for the UN. That's the way I interpret it. I don't interpret this as a change in US position, but that is why I'm saying if that is the future of the UN, I think India should sit with states and see whether we can have an international peace and security cooperation forum. Exclude those states which don't want India in the Permanent Security Council. We all know which those states are. Exclude them. I think it could be 10 years, it could be 15 years, doesn't matter. Time is not an issue for civilizational states, to borrow the language of Ambassador Verma. We should not be bothered about time. If this is what we have to do, I think we have to do. Mr. Atul Aneja, you have the floor. Don't get up. Please. No, actually, can I request Ambassador Hoque? Is that a problem for you? Okay, here.
Yeah.
Why do you have 3 mics and one of them works?
Thank you, Chair, for giving me this opportunity to talk about the multilateralism. I think in the previous session, we spoke about the multipolarity, and multipolarity and the multilateralism is very, very, they are closely engaged with each other. So I'm not going to in details. There is no history, though I'm a student of international relations. So I'm not going to tell you about the history of this UN system, which already mentioned so many times. It is a failed system, And nowadays, whenever we go for the UN session, the yearly session, I'm sorry to make this statement, don't take it other. It's like a Hajj, you are going to Mecca to perform Hajj, And people go there, they are having good picnic, and they scratch each other and they get prizes and everything. I know several examples of this, So it is not so effective, it's understood. And the idea of this multilateralism or the organization, now there is a big threat among the international communities, especially in the Western American understanding that the BRICS, SCO, and this other ASEAN, this organization, they are putting big pressure on this UN system. That's why maybe Trump has not mentioned regarding India's, the place in the UN security system. Maybe that's one of the reasons, the future understanding. And as a student of international relations, and I'm very proud to say that I studied in Moscow in Soviet period, During Soviet period I studied there. So I was direct student of Mr. Primakov. I think you know well about Evgeny Maximovich Primakov. And I remember distinctly that he used to discuss, it was in the 80s, about the RIC, Russia, India, China. So at that time, maybe there was not very good relation with China, but still he was so pragmatic that he was looking ahead that what can happen in the near future in 10, 15 years time. And I have seen the fall of Soviet Union. It's happened in front of me. At the time I was in Moscow, I would say that I was there for more than 25 years, As a student, I went there and I have seen. So why I'm telling this, the formation of this, the understanding of multilateralism, it was a long perceived thing, which came in the formation of BRICS, SCO and other thing. So I think India, the role of India, which you mentioned, Professor, that what can be the Indians' role in this situation, this geopolitical situation, what we are seeing every day there are changes, It's a very unpredictable situation. So India can play a very vital and India should play. Look at this backyard of India, with the relation with the neighboring countries, Pakistan is understand, 75 years you are fighting. You know what is your strategy, they also know each other. But look at this other, Nepal, Maldives, and recently my country, Bangladesh. I'm from Bangladesh, So I know what's happening. I'm not going to, in details, the deep role of the deep state. It's just 3 weeks back, the regime change, itself regime change in USA. In a democratic way, the regime change. And now we are expecting, I am as a Bangladeshi, I expect that since yesterday there was a meeting between Modi and Trump, that I think Trump has given a blank check, I would say, that India should play as far as convenient with the neighboring countries, I'm putting example, maybe this example will not like somebody will not like it, because when I was ambassador based in Moscow, I was covering Ukraine, I was covering Belarus, I was covering all the Baltic states, 5 countries. And fortunately, I studied in Kiev, so back in Soviet Union. So I had a lot of friends there, who retired as an ambassador. So I'm still, as of today, I'm in touch with them. So, it is a backyard of Russia. So I remember distinctly in 2014 when it started, the election, all these things, and 22, the operation. So it was the I think you remember the Putin's speech in Munich, the Munich secret. And that time he already told the West or America what is the consequences of this expansion of NATO. And since I was also covering Baltic country, I was a frequent traveler to that part. They are totally dependent on this, financially, economically, geopolitically, everything they are dependent. Still, as on today, they are dependent. So I think same thing in this, with India and the neighboring country, it's almost same, Maybe geographically different, but if you say theoretically, it's same. So I think India should play, because since India is a major player in the BRICS, the founder of BRICS, I think if they have a good relation with the neighboring country, it will help India's economy and plus our. Look at what Bangladesh is happening now, the rising of the fundamentalism and Hizbut Tahrir, Jamaat Islam and everybody. Now the country is totally shattered. Economy is going down. And we don't see in our future, you know. So in that case, India should play a very
2 minutes.
Please. India should play a very decisive role without hesitating, because in politics and, you know, you cannot hesitate because you cannot put yourself in a dangerous situation, you know. So I would request personally as a Bangladeshi that using this platform, that please think about the neighboring countries, especially my country, which was without India and Soviet support, you know. I'm not supposed to be here, you know, so I'm very grateful to Indian people during your support in 71. I'm a freedom fighter. I was trained in Dehradun. I fought for my country. So you can understand my emotion, how I feel at this stage, what's happening in my country. So this is the second liberation period of Bangladesh, for Bangladesh. With this word, I would like to thank to inviting me for here in this such a good platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Ambassador.
Ambassador Mohan Kumar. I just take off from where my good friend Dr. Saiful left. You know, I think I'm just trying to weave in a thematic line to what he was trying to say. You know, he talked about India's role in South Asia. That he was talking about India's role in South Asia. So to me, it links up with the earlier debate which we're having on multipolarity. That this is one of the poles of the multipolar world, and it has its area of influence. You want to call it? I wouldn't hesitate to call it. Of course, you want to call it your backyard, but then that is South Asia and India, and India as the pole for that. I think that's one of the pillars for the multipolar world and one of the rule makers for the multilateral system which we are talking about. The second big civilization state, which I would say again would be involved in making rules for the multilateral world, would be China. And China is the leader of the, I would say, the Confucian geo-cultural system. I've stayed in China for 5 years, and I've traveled from China to South Korea. And there's a professor there, Professor Li Shiguang of Tsinghua University, and we traveled together. And I had a conversation with him. I said, look, this is your backyard. I can see it till Korea from China. But if you go further south, if you go to ASEAN, if you go to Vietnam, and if you go to Cambodia, this is Indian civilization space. It is our geocultural space. And if you and I, that is India and China, have to live together in a multipolar system, then we have to respect our respective geocultural spaces. So coming back to what Dr. Saiful was saying, India's geocultural space and the geocultural space of the Indian pole in the multipolar system extends to South Asia, and it goes further towards Southeast Asia and Vietnam on one side, and then you look at towards the Eurasian side. You can, the Bamiyan Buddhas, for example, in Afghanistan is a typical example of India's cultural space. And you go further to Termez, and you have this frescoes, Buddhist frescoes over there. So, you know, you can make out that India as a civilization state's bandwidth. The point I'm trying to link up with our topic is that similarly, the United States is a major pole. It's probably the strongest pole of the multipolar system. And frankly, if a new world order has to emerge, and I agree with you fully that we need to trash the old system. It's past its expiry date, long back. And if you are trying to look at evolution of a new system, then the United States, and especially I'm very excited about Donald Trump coming in, because he has rejected the Wilsonian, multilateral, globalist outlook of global responsibility. He's talking in terms of the Monroe Doctrine, that, you know, it's America first, and my backyard is South America. And I will be the unrivaled power over there. So Europe can go and do its bit. So you're seeing the fracturing of the old system, these poles coming together, India, China, the United States probably the strongest. And you can see what's happening in the Ukraine conflict. It's a matter of time before I think Russia emerges as a dominant player in this conflict. And so you'll have the Christian Orthodox civilization coming as another pole of the new emerging global system. And I think if you look for leaders who will be the drivers of the new world order, I can see Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping, and Narendra Modi. This is the face to the new world order. And I think if you're going to have elections in Europe, you're going to probably have AFD coming and Marine Le Pen's party coming in France. So it's going to be the traditionalists versus the wokeists which are going to define, looks like, the new world order. And the rules of the new world order will be defined of multilateralism within it, which have to be defined by these principles which are rising and breaking out of the grave of the Wilsonian post-Yalta global system, which was defined by the United Nations. Time to revamp. If you can't, let it go. And a new system has to emerge from that. I can go on, if you have
you have 2 minutes, please.
Okay. Now, if you have this as a basic structure of the multipolar world, then you downstream it in terms of practical steps, which will be the driving organization of the new world. BRICS plus, definitely, but there's a problem there, which comes to our Galwan and our India-China dispute. I think that's a big, big obstacle to the rise of the new world order. And if you're going to have BRICS plus, then it's priority of both India and China to resolve the major geopolitical impediment, because then we can bond together and work together much more. Russia, China, Eurasia comes together in a much resource-rich Russia with all the critical minerals, new economy, technology. Somebody was talking about DeepSeek in the earlier session. So you got the brain power, you got the minerals. What Mackinder used to say, that this is the world island, one to rule the world and rule the world. So we're coming into that kind of a situation. And then we draw our own financial order out of it. Currencies, whether dollar, I think dollar will be one of the major currencies, but so would be other currencies as well. You're going to have a basket of currencies which are going to be important. If you're going to have World Bank or IMF, which you talked about, you also have to have a new development bank of the BRICS. Imagine with UAE or Saudi Arabia joining it, the capitalization of the bank from $50 billion can go to $150 billion, competing with World Bank and IMF. Those are the financial institutions which you can see that they are within grasp now, which were not there. And more so, I think what's happened in the United States, this is our opportunity. Probably we'll have a four-year window out of it, because who knows, the deep state comes back. You never know. I mean, the assassination attempt on Trump was not, something which was completely unexpected. So there is a small window which needs to be expended. And there I would go to my good friend Saiful, that if you have to do something about Bangladesh region, we have to do it in a finite time. Because both geopolitical, geoeconomics, finance, multilateralism are all clubbed, they're all together. You do one, you have to do the other as well. I'll stop here. Thank you.
So thank you very much. Far be it for me to summarize, but let me at least put two ideas before you, and then I'm happy to take questions from the audience. So one thought that clearly comes out is that the existing multilateral institutions as we know it are well past their shelf life. One view is junk it. The other view could be try to keep your membership claims and keep the pot boiling, or stir the pot as it were, knowing full well the existing P5 and some in particular will never allow an expansion with veto powers. It is not going to happen. I've waited long enough, and I don't think India should wait 20 more years. That's my view, but I'm happy to hear views. The other view which has come out is also equally interesting. Professor Gulshan Sachdeva said that, but Mr. Aneja has said it as well, which is that issue-based. I think India is doing a lot of things. I'm talking of IMEC, I'm talking of I2U2, talking of quadrilateral, talking of the number of trilaterals that we have now, with UAE, with Australia, with Japan, and those kind of fora, which are 2 or 3 countries, but maybe a little bit more sometimes, will multiply. As the UN and others block us, there is no choice for India except to do this. There will be security, for example, quadrilateral. There is no sense in saying quadrilateral is not security. It is not traditional security. There is guns and tanks and artillery. But it is public health security. It is climate change security. It is economic security. If that is not security, what is security, frankly? So all non-traditional areas of security are covered by quadrilateral, whether other countries like it or not. So let me stop here and kind of ask your questions. I see yeah, please, if somebody can take the mic somewhere, hello, if somebody can help.
Two specific questions. I think the voice will carry.
Voice will carry, but I'm concerned about the people at the back. They should be able to hear. भैया ये थोड़ा सबको दे देना. Hello.
Hello.
आप वहीं रह जाओ. Thanks.
The first question to Ambassador from Bangladesh.
Ambassador Hoque, yes.
You mentioned that Trump has given Modi a carte blanche, presumably arising out of that question which was posed, and he said that the Prime Minister will answer. But there is I think we are all focused at this point of time on the Modi and USA, Modi-Trump dialogue. But how this particular aspect brings us to question how sincere the American position is, because we also know that 3 days ago, a delegation of the BNP, a 3-member delegation of the BNP met President Trump for a breakfast meeting, including the young daughter of the family. And yesterday, or maybe today, the BNP started demanding that India hand over Hasina. So does this not kind of spell that the brief handed over to the BNP team and the averment to the Indian Prime Minister
Thank you, sir.
don't go hand in hand?
Thank you, sir. If we can keep our questions brief. Your question on Bangladesh, very valid. Is that all right? Yeah, thanks. I'll come to you, Ambassador Hoque. We'll collect a few questions. Yeah, next one. Yes, please. Grab a mic. I mean, I don't know how to do this better. Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
Good evening, Ambassador General Sudhakar. Fantastic looking at your passion, and the insight which you are giving is actually the need of the hour in today's geopolitics. Being a student of geopolitics, the same thought also comes to my mind. Why not we jettison, just jump the whatever is not working out, going for something creative and innovative as you have suggested. But that is not a practical solution. What comes to my mind is that times are changing. We are talking or discussing the issue in 21st century. Threat in 20th century was different from the threat in 21st century. We are witness to Hamas attacking, electromagnetic spectrum being blacked out by a non-state actor. Has anyone ever heard about it? So what it brings to me is that perhaps there are new dynamics which are emerging. This is a golden window of opportunity for India. We need to be like they call in Fauji language, Lomdi Chal, need to wait in the ambush, pounce for it. How good we can actually transform or capitalize is a matter of time. Second point,
Thank you.
Very quick.
You'll have to keep it short.
Geoeconomics is another issue. Which
one?
Geoeconomics. The future conflict, as per me, is not going to be contested by a kinetic warfare. It is a hybrid warfare which is already being experienced in different parts of the world. Geoeconomics. China, if at all it is going to have a conflict with any country, it is by the economics which it will win. Therefore, India has to factor this in and going for, capitalizing the option of what you have just indicated. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Please. Keep your questions shorter.
Right.
Thank you.
So, I come from a background of AI, basically. That is what I work upon. Let me point out 3 things, which I've been hearing all the eminent speakers. Decisive strategic advantage. The whole race on AI is to achieve a decisive strategic advantage. History is repeating itself. US is already there. You must have heard Trump has announced $500 billion target project, right? So much of investment. They have been doing $3 trillion investment in AI. They have adopted a strategy, they call it AI first strategy.
Question.
Right, I'm coming to the question part of it. So second part, they are investing hugely into their infrastructure in AI. We don't have the data sovereignty, neither we have got the sovereign AI. Our data is in hands either in the US or in China, right? China has done a wonderful job, they have stopped that. Third, that is what I pointed out, they call it potentialism, where they're leveraging AI for the technological abundance. And the third part of that whole thing is that we are in a threat condition, okay? It is going to be a unipolar world. It is going to be a world subjugated, where narrative will be set, where the economics will be set by AI, where the AI is moving to from AGI to artificial superintelligence levels, which they have already achieved, ChatGPT moving to...
So your point is India is ill-prepared?
India is not prepared at all. So how we are going to counter that?
Okay.
We need innovation, we need capacity, we need to change our DNA. What is that we need to look at?
Okay, any other question? Good.
Slowly understand my problem, you know. So, thank you for your question. I think you asked the question, you know who is BNP, what is their background, better than me. So breakfast meeting is you have to pay for that, you know. Nothing is free in America. So they paid the money, they have the lobbyist in America, they arranged the whole thing. Now there is a new ambassador in Washington from Bangladesh. So I know him personally, so they arranged meeting. So I don't think so it will make any difference. So whatever the decision is taken by, between Trump and Modi, Prime Minister Modi, I think he will take accordingly the action. Thank you.
Thank you. The larger question is that can you really become a leading power if you do not have influence in your neighborhood? That's a larger question, and there are answers both ways, really. It's not as if China is loved by every one of its neighbor, but China has influence in its neighborhood. I think India's problem is not a question of winning a beauty contest in Bangladesh or Sri Lanka or Nepal. It's a question of just hard power and influence, not in a negative sense, but in a positive sense. Anyway, General Sudhakar, right? Your point is valid. My sense is, and I'm no longer with the government, so I don't have to parrot an official line, my sense is that the government of India is doing everything possible in terms of creating coalitions of the willing on different subjects. For example, Mineral Security Partnership, India is a part of it. We have the HADR, you know, the disaster relief that we put forward. We are a part of that, obviously. We would like to be a first responder. Again, on things like semiconductor, we are trying to get into the act. So you can't, on this issue, accuse the government of India of not doing anything. We are conscious of the cutting edge areas of tomorrow's technology. You take a look at the Franco-Indian joint statement on quantum computing and artificial intelligence. There is a distinct roadmap. And now I see there is a roadmap also with regard to US. I agree with you, roadmaps are roadmaps. Somebody will have to implement it, but at least we are halfway there. So I take your point, but I would put it to you that India is doing something about it. Your point on AI, look, it's like this. I wrote about it recently, so it's fresh in my mind. You've got the American model of AI, which calls for very limited regulation, which calls for proprietary AI, not open source AI. America favors proprietary AI, where the source code and the code itself is in possession of the company. It's not freely available to everybody. Then you've got the Chinese model, which is state-driven, right? So it is open AI, to be fair to DeepSeek, but it is state-driven. So you have the ethics aspect of it coming in. Are they going to use it for facial recognition? Are they going to use it for distinguishing between those who get some social credit and those who don't? I don't know. So then you have a third way, which is, I thought, what France and India was trying to do. The European Union, India are very similar in the sense we don't want completely unregulated because we don't want the market to do everything. At the same time, we don't have tech giants. Neither Europe nor India has any Google or Meta or Alibaba or Weibo, whatever. We are in the middle where we don't have tech giants, but we believe in open source AI, and we believe that AI should be ethical. And I think India has done a damn good job of the digital public infrastructure. The UPI is nothing short of a miracle. We have just taken it for granted, but imagine how much life has become better. I now feel when I go back to the United States or Europe, sometimes I feel I am in the third world there, not here. Because you have to take out your plastic, use it, and it's quite painful actually. So in some ways, I think you have to give it to the Indian system, which is that whether it is Aadhaar, whether it is digital public infrastructure, we believe it's got to be an open source AI. We cannot afford a proprietary AI which is very expensive because Indians can't afford it, If you give it to the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Sundar Pichais of this world, it will be expensive. So that's a bit of an issue. And last but not least, ethical considerations will come in. And I'm going to conclude with this because I'm conscious of the fact that we are keeping Mr. Tejendra Khanna waiting. I asked my question of 50 students that I teach. I said, I'm going to give you 3 options. Which is the option that you will trust most with your personal data? Option 1, Government of India. Option 2, Ambani or private sector. You can say Indian private sector. Third option, Mark Zuckerberg, based in California. You'll be surprised. The answer was roughly split between Mark Zuckerberg and Government of India. I asked them why. They said Mark Zuckerberg is the safest because we are not important and nobody is going to bother about it. It's lying somewhere in California. I don't care. I said, why Government of India? He says, sir, we believe in the supreme inefficiency of the Government of India. They will not do anything with my data. I felt a little bad having worked for the Government of India for 36 years. And then why not Indian private sector? Because I told them that you go to the German embassy, you go to the French embassy, you give them every single data, including your sex life, if it means getting a visa. You will give everything. Whatever they ask, you give. But why do you not give it to either the Indian private sector or the Indian government? They said, well, we need the trust. We don't want to be gone after. People don't want to get after you and so on. But I would still say there is a fair degree of trust with Government of India after the Aadhaar. But that is something for you to put it in your pipe and smoke. Any other comments from you? No. Thank you very much, sir. Sorry to keep you waiting, but the floor is yours. Thank you, guys.